welcome back to another guest episode of Straight from the Drafts. Today we are joined by Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We have known each other for years.
5, 6 years now? Yeah.
And then our worlds kind of recollided again middle of last year. So I'm very excited to talk to you today.
I'm very excited to have a yap as well.
You've got a lot to catch us up on. I feel like the last few years have been big ones. So I'm looking forward to everyone hearing your story because it's a bit different.
Unconventional, unique, interesting, eye-catching have all been words that people have said my story sounds like. So shall I just introduce myself?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, so hi, I'm Laura. I'm 27, as from about 7 days before recording this podcast episode. Another year around the sun, and I started by doing a drama degree back in 2018, and was supposed to graduate it in March of 2020. And we all know what happened in March 2020, especially with the arts industry. Exactly. So that's how I got into marketing. I chose to do a marketing master's. And I got to around December of 2020, was halfway through my master's, and everyone was saying, make sure you build like a portfolio so you've got things to show employers when you finish uni. I started Business Girls. If anyone's listening that remembers Business Girls, that was my baby when I first started marketing. And it honestly started out as a quotes page. That's what it was at its like first stage. And then I started getting people asking about marketing tips, and I was sharing my degree, so I started sharing marketing tips. Then I started getting clients, and then by the time I finished my master's, it had turned into a social media management agency that I ran up until 2022. That's how me and Nao know each other. And then I had some personal life changes and decided to go and work in the cruise ship industry for what turned out to be 3 years. So I went to Nao and everyone else in the marketing industry, I'm taking a career break, and went and worked on cruise ships. Originally just thought it was going to be like a Greek Mamma Mia summer, just selling excursions.
It was like an initial 6-month contract or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was never intended to be.
It was never intended to be very long. I had the business on pause and I was going to try and do it alongside working on a ship, which if anyone's listening and has worked on a cruise ship, you know that A, the Wi-Fi isn't great, and B, it consumes your life. You live on board, you work on board, all of your life is on board. So I loved my summer out there and decided to stay for another 2 contracts. And there was this element of my job which was selling excursions when people went off into the ports of call that we got to. So I would sell like going to the Acropolis in Greece or going to the Colosseum in Rome. And then there was this other little section that was what I can only describe as being a travel agent on board. I would sell future cruises to people that wanted to go on another one. And it got to around December 2023, and my friend who had left that company said, why don't you apply for this company, because they have an entire role around being a travel agent and in charge of sales and loyalty on board. I applied, quit my job with that company, flew home, didn't get the job. So I did what any normal 24-year-old at that point does, or 25, and booked a cruise as a guest to go to Australia to cruise up to Hong Kong after a few glasses of wine and some cruise credit that was left over. You probably see like an element of like self-trust in these kind of milestones where it's like, why did you do that? And it's all kind of worked out. So then I went to another company because 2 days before I went to Australia, they asked to re-interview me. I got the job and I became the youngest female senior officer on board that company for all 4 of my contracts. At some points was the youngest female on board in that position. So that was very exciting, but very hard work. Then I started to miss working for myself, started to miss marketing, started to miss writing. I've always been a writer.
Starting to miss land, or were you good with the actual sea element?
I was good up until there was a few changes within the company structure which affected my role. And then some of my friends started having kids, my parents are getting older, and normally about 3-4 years, same in relationships, people say you get a 4-year ick and a 7-year ick. I feel like when you've worked on cruise ships, you start about 3-4 years in thinking, am I going to do this for like 20 years or am I going to do it for like 2-3 more years? So This is where the self-trust really comes into play. It was March of last year, so 12 months ago, because this is being filmed in February. 12 months ago, I literally didn't know anything that was about to happen. I was going to stay with that company because I wanted to do the world cruise, which, if anyone's not familiar with working on a cruise or being on a cruise, the world cruise is normally what all the crew want to work. It's like the final boss of the cruise ship industry. You do a world cruise, you can't really get further than that. I had the opportunity to join the end of the world cruise, so I thought, let me stay one more contract and I'll do that. Like I said, I was a writer. I have been a writer since I was like 8, and I wanted to do something with that, but I wasn't entirely sure on what that was. I was having a travel blog at the time. I was thinking, can I try and take that full time? I get to the world cruise and it was an incredible experience, but people have spent years, even decades, saving up to go on this cruise. So expectations were high. I was obviously a senior officer. I was in charge of loyalty, in charge of revenue, the events that guests had, and we were launching the 2027 World Cruise on the 2025 World Cruise. So we had a very hot audience, obviously everyone that would want to have that. So it was an incredibly intense, busy 2.5 weeks of the end of the World Cruise. That's how long it was, about 2.5, 3 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime because there was so much going on. I joined in South Africa and we cruised up. By the time I got to the Canaries in Madeira, I'd messaged a friend and I was like, I think maybe it's time to pass the baton. But I don't know how to move home because I work on a ship, I'm a seafarer, and it's quite hard for anyone in this economy to get their own place. Half an hour later, I'm sat in if anyone's been to Madeira, there's a really good place called Steak on the Stone. I think it's got another name, but you basically cook a steak on a stone and you cook it yourself. Really cool.
Delicious.
And I was sat opposite my friend, and as cruise ships are, everyone knows everyone, and this was a friend of a guy that I used to be romantically involved with. And he was talking about how he wanted to rent his home because he was on ships all the time and he owned it, but he was just paying his salary straight to the mortgage. And if only there was someone that wanted to rent who was kind of almost done with cruise ships, which was me. And I said to him, I was like, I'm genuinely serious about renting your house. This does have a point. This is a very long intro. But I basically moved into that house in June. It's been about 7 months now. So I've come back into the marketing industry. Me and Noah have been chatting a lot more often. And I've basically started an agency called The Writer's Harbour, which is homage to my time at ships, but is also focused around writing. And it's focused around like long form content like blogs, SEO, LinkedIn, and also Pinterest marketing, because that's very closely linked to SEO and copywriting. So that's like my journey from an acting degree to a master's during COVID to running my own social media agency to going to cruise ships and becoming an officer to coming home and being able to get my own place and live by myself, which has always been a lifelong dream, to running my own agency in a more aligned way than the first time round was when I started Business Girls. It was very much community-centred marketing, but I was kind of just doing a little bit of everything. The Writer's Harbour is now very intentionally writer-specific, slow marketing-specific, Pinterest, LinkedIn, emails. And throughout that whole journey, there's been elements of self-trust along every step.
I was going to say, I think with the first time around with Business Girls, from the way that you described getting into it, it was almost, I don't know if accidental is the right word, but it was just kind of like people asked you for stuff and then you did it and it happened, whereas what you're doing now is very much a choice, very intentional, very thought through. So I imagine even though it's like, yeah, marketing business 2.0, they feel very different.
They do. I still think there's the element of supporting female founders through their journey. And I feel like that's normally who I tend to gravitate to with clients because they are going through very similar experiences that I've gone through. Like if something personal happens in your life and you're running a business, or how to leave a client that potentially you're cutting a service from or you're no longer aligned with, or you've lost a client, how do you fill that space economically if you're like, I'm paying for all my bills now. That's very different to when I was on the ship and everything's included. I got home and I was like, how much are eggs? Because I've been out of the UK for like 3 years. And that's predominantly why I work with female founders, because the struggles that they face, not only in their business but personally, are things that I've faced as well.
Yeah. Interesting that you have gone from this like really fast paced life on ships, very intense. Like we voice noted very occasionally while you were away when you had the Wi-Fi and the time. And it just sounded so hectic. Whereas now your focus is slow marketing. And it's almost like you've created the antidote to the chaos that has been the last 3 years of your life.
I do think that when you're running a business, you need to be an antidote to something. So if you think of a sustainable fashion brand, they're completely against fast fashion. I'm not saying I'm completely against the rise of TikTok and Instagram marketing and that real quick virality. I do think that has its place. But the one thing that stayed through my journey on ships was the travel blog that I had. Pinterest was still firing people to my blog throughout the first year and a half of being on ships. And now that is doing the exact same for the renamed travel blog. And emails for my clients, they build up over time. My LinkedIn was really nerve-wracking to come back to, and one of my biggest, I wouldn't say regret, but one of my biggest things is I would have loved to keep my LinkedIn going when I was on ships. But I think when you're employed by someone else, there is a bit of nervous energy when you're posting on LinkedIn because you don't want your employer to think you're trying to find another job.
Yeah.
So I do think a lot of people think that. So ever since I've come back to LinkedIn, my audience hasn't really changed. A lot of people have been like, oh, we're glad you're back on LinkedIn. How are you? How was ships? A lot of people actually want to know what cruise ships are like, because I do feel like it's a very grey area. I didn't know anyone that worked on cruise ships until I did. But all three of those avenues are the things that stayed pretty constant through my career at sea. The Instagram I had for business girls, I just completely wiped and started afresh with the Writers' Harbour. And that's why I've moved towards slow marketing. I do find it interesting how you said I've gone from a very fast-paced environment to quite a slow one. And I would say it's probably taken about 6 months for me to adjust to being back on land. When you're on ships, yes, I was an officer, so I had my own cabin at that point, but you live all together, you socialise all together, your lives are entwined often all together. And to go from that to working at home, I now live about 6.5 hours away from my family and friends in Dorset. I live up near Hull, near the Humber, and life just completely took me that way. And I was thinking of that area anyway. I've always been wanting to go to the north. I don't know why, but it's always been
Up the north.
gravitation up the north. I think I am starting to kind of speed up my life a little bit, but in a way that's intentional. So I am starting to go back to the gym. I am starting to go out more in like Manchester and Leeds. But I do think when I came home, it was very much a shock to the system. And also leading back to self-trust. When I signed the 12-month lease for this house, because it's a house, which I never envisioned, I thought I would be in a flat, but it's a beautiful place I have. I had my savings, but I had the grand total of 0 clients at that point. And from June to September, I got my first client in September, at the start of September. So from the 1st of July, really, July was quite a chill month. I was like, I've got to save, so it'll be fine, I'll get a client. To September. August was the month in my life where I think I've held the most self-trust, because it was when I was moving for an undergrad to a master's and I was trying to get accommodation and get my references. That was August. This August just gone is when I had no clients and I had rent due on the 23rd, and I was genuinely starting to think, is this a completely wrong idea? Am I going to have to go back to ships? Am I going to have to... I didn't know what to do. And then I got my clients on the 2nd, and it was that moment of people say when you are working towards something, everything else tends to fall apart to make room for that thing. And I've never felt that as strongly as in August, where I was like, I have no clients. Doors are getting shut right on me, left, right, and centre. I applied to like retail bits, and I said this in another podcast, so I'm okay saying it now, but I thought I would do some night shifts at Tesco's, and they said no. And I was like, right, this is a low point, but obviously there was a reason for it.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting my client a few days later, and now everything's just kind of nicely skyrocketed. And I think, like you said, because I'm so intentional about what this business is for this time around, it's still got the community element, but Business Girls was very much almost more of like a community page. The Writer's Harbour is for female founders who are looking to get out of the hamster wheel of Instagram and TikTok and actually utilize LinkedIn, utilize email marketing for conversion, and utilize Pinterest for the long-term game.
What you said there about like it always happens in August, this like big self-trust period is always in August. Was this time round scarier than the first big self-trust August, or is it just different? Because I've had this discussion a couple of times now where it's like the most recent moment of self-trust probably feels the biggest because you've got that hindsight of, oh well, it all worked out, whereas I guess you're like slightly removed enough now from that August already. Like, can you compare the two? Or
I think I've got my little sister who's going through her A-levels right now, and I think one thing that we don't sometimes realize is that her struggles are as big as they are for her because she's not had anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
I look back at my A-levels and GCSEs and I think, oh, I got through them, I scraped through them. But for her, there's nothing bigger. So I try and empathise with that. I think with the first August, and this is probably not what everyone's going to expect me to say, but I was in a relationship. I'd been in a relationship for about 3.5 years at that point. So I had someone to lean on. And I think this section from moving home to now, especially at the time of this recording, it's just been me. And it's been 6.5 hours away from family and friends. I do have like my landlord's friends in the town and his parents live nearby, but it has just been me. No real partner on the side. New friends that I'm making in this area. A lot of my friends that I've relied on have been people like, where I've been messaging you being like, I've not got a client yet. It's just all just absolutely like insane. But I do feel like this August when I had to just think, no, this is just you. You've got to get yourself through this. And I have a very supportive family and have friends and all of that. But in that moment, it was just me. Do feel like that made it a bigger August. And definitely in terms of leadership, I can support myself through so much more than I ever thought I could whilst not being in a relationship. So I definitely think it's bigger in that terms. In terms of starting the business, I knew that I'd got clients the first time round, so I just had that belief that I would get them the second time round. And we scaled to where I was with Business Girls 18 months in. I scaled to that level about 4 months in with the Writer's Harbour. So things have happened very quickly because I've already done it. What I have found now is now I've got to that point, everything else is unknown territory. So there's almost a bit of an invisible line, especially with the income. I've got to the same level of income, and it's almost like that thing that your brain it has no proof that you can get further than that. So that's been the hardest thing of being like, oh, I could potentially reach 4 or 5k months, but I haven't done it yet, and I've got no proof that I've done it yet. So I do feel like that's the thing that I'm working on at the moment, like pushing through that unknown territory and giving my brain reasons to believe that that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, just before we get too far off what you were saying about being in a relationship last time versus this time, like I'm really glad that you've mentioned that, and I'm glad that you acknowledge that for yourself, because I really think that is something to be really proud of. I go to my partner all the time, too much probably. I go to him as much as some people probably go to ChatGPT. I'm like, what shall I wear today? What shall we have for tea today?
Yeah, but he's a sweetheart, isn't he? So
he's a very good egg. I'm very lucky. But I do think, like, props to you, and I'm really glad that you're acknowledging, like, yep, I've got this, and I've got to do it myself, and I will do it myself, and I now have done it myself. Like, fair play.
Yeah, maybe it's the hyper-independent eldest daughter in me, but I do think if anyone's listening to this and you are in a period of your life where you're single and potentially running a business, or even if you're just single and just trying to get through your mid-20s, doing it yourself and not compromising on who you're with just because you want to be with someone, I think is the biggest thing you can do. Because then when you do pull it off and you do it yourself, you're just like, oh, okay, like, I didn't need that additional part of my life. I can do it myself, and I can give everything I want to myself. And then when the time comes that I meet someone, I'm already kind of all sorted. So.
Yep, they are a bonus rather than something that you need. Yeah, sorry, I kind of like I dipped back a step there because I just wanted to make sure you had that moment to shout that out. With the sort of next step for the business, like you were saying, you've now got to almost convince yourself that it's possible without the past evidence that you've had from setting up the business the first time around. Is there anything that you're doing, like rituals, habits? Is there anything that you're doing to build the self trust without the evidence, I guess?
So after August, after I got my clients, it was Q4, and Q4 is not for the weak. And I was working really hard and was just about scraping by. So I wasn't really building a very balanced life at that point. And I'll be totally transparent about that. It was kind of work, supermarket shop, traveling for work, occasionally seeing family. When I travelled down to London, I would then pop down to Dorset for a bit, come back to London, do some more work, go back up to Manchester, go to see a client, come back to
Yeah,
North
you did some
Lincolnshire.
crazy travel last year.
Yeah, and it caught up on me. And I do think that there is a lot of narrative, and this is going to get me some backlash. A lot of narrative on social media at the moment where there are entrepreneurs that are pushing this work 4 hours a week, work 4 hours a day, um, cut your services down, raise your pricing, all of this, and that's amazing, and that's where we all want to be. But you've got to go through the messy start and messy middle of running a business from the ground. Like I started from zero, and I just had to get like in the door. Now, now I'm only just coming to kind of I came to the slow marketing, LinkedIn, email, Pinterest, even though it had always been there. I came to coining that term probably around December, January time. So throughout September, December, my core focus was focus on female founders and their journeys. And that's always been my mission and my grind. But now this year, I'm kind of turning to them and I'm being like, let's focus on your LinkedIn. Let's focus on your Pinterest. Let's focus on your SEO, your email marketing. Let's focus on like strategically switching that so that you're not having to focus on like untrustworthy algorithms on Instagram. And that's basically been the 4 months of where we've been. But in that Q4, my habits went, they just went. They didn't exist.
In the bin.
And when I first moved in my house, it was lovely. I was keeping it very like, journaling and habits. And by like December, I was like, let me just get through the day. And if anyone's feeling that in the business right now, 100% valid. But if you're able to take a week or a couple of days off, I've just been on holiday, literally got back yesterday, and woke up at like midday today thinking it was like 8 a.m. because the jet lag's still in. But I did not go on my phone for those 7 days. I need to take pictures. And I feel like that automatically feeds into slow marketing. My LinkedIn's gained 60, 70 connections since I left. Emails from my clients who've filled out their programs. Pinterest is still trustworthily bringing me leads and traffic and nice green analytics. And I haven't had to do anything. And I almost feel like going down the slow marketing route has almost done a U-turn on my habits because I have more time and because I'm moving at a slower pace. I'm thinking, okay, how can I fill my time with like intentional things to do? I do believe you need white space, but intentional habits. How do I personally fill up my cup? I know someone like my dad, when we were on holiday, his cup is filled by doing things, and the more he does things, the more energy he'll like create. Whereas I do need like a couple of hours where I will sit, but I can't do nothing. I'll need to have like an audiobook on or a book on, or I'll need to be painting. And I do also think that, again, being in a life path right now where I am single, it's that, and I've completely come off all the dating apps and everything like that. All of that time that I was spending worrying, fretting, who I'm going to meet, how I'm going to meet them, is now going into things like, maybe I should start that tap dancing class that I've always wanted to do. Maybe I should go to the gym on a Wednesday because that's the point of being self-employed. That's what we do it all for. We do it for the time. Slow marketing for me has not only changed the way I show up in my business, it's not only changed the way that my clients have received more money, more time off their own hands, it's also changed the way in which I show up in for my life. And now I can see the habits are slowly coming back in. But I'm saying that Q4 AQ file's really busy anyway. I just started my business, and you are in the thick of it when you just start your business. And C, sometimes you need to go through that to get to the slower part. But I do believe that my slow marketing strategy of being a slow marketing agency, and when I say slow marketing, I mean content that has a longer life cycle. So if you think of a TikTok that's only around for maybe an hour, 4 hours before it gets eaten by the algorithm, if it doesn't do well, Pinterest can pop off after 3, 6, 9 months and give you constant traffic for 2 to 3 years. Emails can build up your list over years, and then you send out one email and you make more than you would have done on Instagram in 2 months. LinkedIn, again, you build up your network and you get podcast opportunities, you get speaking opportunities, you get people asking you to come down for events. It's all slow marketing and it's done over time. And I do feel like now I've lent into that, it is sorting out the habits and the way I live my life. And it feels slower, but it feels more intentional. And that is something I did enjoy about Ships, even though it's incredibly fast paced. You do get a very good structure of doing things. And then when you come home, you do get that month where you have complete time off. So it's like I've mixed the 3 months of busyness and the 1 month of like holiday with just continuous slowness and just like a more balanced way of living life, especially in a world where we are glued to a lot of screens a lot of our time.
Yeah, I think like literally practicing what you preach, you are living the sort of, you have all this slow marketing set up for yourself. I assume that helps promote what you do because you're living it. So you're showing that you completely believe in it, and also you've got yourself as a case study to, like we were talking about, how are you going to trust yourself to get to this next level with the business without the evidence that you've done it before? It's almost just in the day to day, I guess, of, well, it works for me and I'm doing it, so let me show you how.
I think it's that element of when we say next stage, and I know we've talked about this now, but next stage of our business doesn't actually have to be financial.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk in the industry where it's big income goals, and it's, even now I've seen more, it's less of the 10k months and the 20k months, it's more of the let's build a company and build it to the point where we can get investors and exit companies in our 30s, and I think that's amazing. But for me, my goal has always been to have my own place, to have a nice balanced life where I can go to the gym on a Wednesday, to be able to see family, see friends, travel, still be able to go traveling and have the business. And realistically, I don't necessarily need that much more income to make that completely viable. I think maybe I'm like 1 or 2 clients off having that complete stability. And will my goals change in the future? Maybe. But my next step in my business is slightly financial, but it's also a lot more that's really focus on, because I love the clients I have right now, really focus on their slow marketing journeys, focus on how I'm also showing up for my own company, which I've made the decision to only post once a week on Instagram and post a week in a slow marketer's life. And that's just going to be my post going out for the next year. Every Sunday, just going to be like a week in slow marketing. Here's what you can do for your business for if you wanted to do more slow marketing. And I'm interested to see if that has like an opposite effect on people actually being like, oh, I know the Writers Hub is going to post on a Sunday evening. Let me actively find it instead of just discovering my reel on a scroll after 35 minutes, liking it, finding it really interesting, and then just swiping right past. I want to create more of like a community and more of a in-depth audience on Instagram, which I think is what I do on LinkedIn and email and Pinterest already, and it works, and blogs work. Can I transition slow marketing into a fast marketing platform like Instagram? That's kind of the challenge I'm doing in the next stage of my business.
I love that experiment. And I think what you've shared there is such a good message. Like, it doesn't get talked about enough. And I think there's probably a lot of people listening that need to hear it and kind of need that reminder that it's almost like your whole journey over the last few years has been a series of scary decisions and holding the faith and having that trust in yourself. And actually, now it's not about a scary decision. It's having the self-trust or self-awareness, I guess, is probably the more accurate phrase, of knowing what you want and just putting your blinkers on and not getting caught up in success milestones that you actually don't care about.
I know. I've seen so many people speak about how they hit high months and then they completely stripped away everything from their business and started again because they felt burnt out. I don't want to say everything's perfect in my slow marketing world. I'm currently looking at 2 parts of a Christmas tree in front of my laptop because I have no attic and I don't know where to put them. And it's February. And I
love
only
that.
took down the tree at like the end of January because I was like, if I go to the Caribbean for a week and my tree's still up, my neighbours are just going to think something's wrong.
Yeah.
So I don't know where to put that. Sometimes I just wake up at midday because I'm jet lagged. Other days I literally think, should I go back full-time traveling and try and manage the business on the side? Because I went on holiday to the Caribbean on a cruise ship where half of my colleagues worked.
Nice.
And I was like, they were all going, oh, come back, do you not miss it? And it did get the brain going. And I was like, the whole reason that I stepped away was to have a slower pace of life. But when you get back in that bubble, you do sometimes think, oh, there were elements that I missed of it. Or, well, I wonder if I could do both on the side. The whole reason I'm building the Writers Harbour in a slow marketing way and a way that I can send out emails, send out LinkedIn and get opportunities whilst have Pinterest bringing traffic to my site is so that I can take a weekend off every month and go traveling, or I could go on a work holiday and go down to South America and take my laptop with me, or that I could go and see my family on a Thursday if my sister's in a play, if she's doing something acting wise, or go to my friend's hen night or whatever. It's just like having a bit of that freedom. I've also never worked in the corporate world either. I went straight from working, doing a master's, running my own business, to going onto cruise ships. So seeing all of my friends in the corporate world, I don't think this is talked about enough either in the social media, digital marketing world, is corporate have some really good perks. You get 4 weeks of holiday or 5 weeks of holiday every week. You get every year. You get bank holidays, you get Christmas, you get the social side of corporate as well. And I do think that coming home, I just have been thinking about all of these things. And that's why I've made all the decisions in my business, because I'm going to run a business. I'm going to run it in the way I would ideally like to run it, not in a way I think I should run it to put appearances on for social media, because who knows who's going to be looking at our social media in 100 years, especially mine. I don't think that's going to really be on top of everyone's mind. And just like you said, pulling that pressure away and doing what you want to do and thinking of all these options that we have in our 20s. You could go corporate, you could work on a cruise ship. I highly recommend it. It was so much fun. You could run a business, you could start a podcast, but it's doing it in a way that's really aligned and comfortable for you. Because I think if I didn't enjoy my business, why don't I go corporate? Why don't I get 4 weeks of holiday a year? Because I certainly don't do that as a freelancer. It's because I love what I do with my business. That's the reason I do it. And I do it for the people I help. And I do it for the movement we're creating, which is slow marketing over virality.
Love that. I don't know if you've got anything else that you kind of want to share along that self-trust line, but I feel like that is actually a really nice place to wrap up. Like, that is such a good ending message for everyone of like, what are you doing this for? And, you know, if you're not enjoying it, then stop. You decide. You get to choose.
Yeah, I do think that I'd always grown up and I always thought, I'm going to work for myself. I'm not going to do 9 to 5. I'm going to do something interesting, whether it's acting or marketing or working on ships. And I actually went on a ship in 2016 as a guest from July 21st to July 27th, 2015. I rejoined that same ship 10 years later on the 2nd of August. So literally almost 10 years later to the date, as a female officer, one of the only female officers on the stage. I remember sitting there at 16 thinking I would love to work on a cruise ship, but my role didn't exist 10 years ago, but it does now on ships. And the only people I could see that I could potentially ever go, I can't drive the ship, I can't keep my house tidy, so I'd be awful at trying to keep cabins tidy, can't really cook under pressure, and couldn't sing. So I was like, oh, there's not really any kind of place for me there. And then it turned out that 10 years later it did. So I think the only thing I would say is if it's not working out and you're not enjoying it, do change it, especially while you're in your 20s. Who knows what I'll be doing in the next 4 years? Because if you told me 5 years ago all of this would have happened when I was 21, in a relationship, at uni, planning to go and do acting full time, I would have worked on cruise ships, left my relationship, had a house of like I live in on my own, I would have been like, what? What happened? But obviously in a good way. Having that, it's like my life could completely change in 2 years' time. And life is short. I know it sounds so cliche, but life is short. If you're not enjoying it, don't keep doing it because you've said to everyone around you that you're doing it. I know when I left my business and worked on ships, my grandparents were a bit like, but you've got a master's degree. And I was like, but I want to travel the world. Just go and do it, and do it alone and do it scared rather than doing it with other people and knowing it's not really the thing you want to do. And don't kind of, even if you don't think you're on the right track, everything works out for a reason that you should get there in the next couple of years. I feel like I'm rambling a bit now and I should have probably just left it. But if you like it, do it. And if you don't. But
we love a waffle. The podcast goes out on a Wednesday, so it's always a waffle Wednesday.
Waffle Wednesday, I love that. But if my podcast and you're listening to it has taught you anything, it's just to go for it, take the risk. If the risk doesn't pay off, there's always another option in your 20s, whatever it is. If this didn't work out, I could have gone back to ships. I could have gone back to a different company. I could have gone full time and met someone. I don't know what could have happened, but I think, especially with an offer I was talking about with you now a couple of weeks ago, I'm launching an offer. It starts this month, actually. It's called Voyage Mapping. And it's where we take your LinkedIn, we take your emails, and we take your Pinterest. And we don't just create the content for you as an agency. We get on the call with you. We workshop the content together. Then we get on a call 2 weeks later and actually dissect what's worked, what hasn't, the actual secrets behind why it works and why it doesn't. Because some social media agencies, they will just give you the content, but when that social media agency cuts that service, you're left in the dark. You don't know where to go. Or you have courses and workshops which are great, but you don't have someone to ask all of those questions to after you've done it. That's what we're merging together with Voyage Mapping. And when I created that offer, it's like a light bulb went off in my head and I was like, this is what I should be doing. This is my core offer. I still have my clients that I do email and LinkedIn and Pinterest.
Instagram. Underline. Not Instagram.
I can still do Instagram. We can still get results from it. It's not like I don't do Instagram because I can't get results from it. We've actually had some really good results from it from our clients the last couple of weeks. But email, LinkedIn and Pinterest is really strong. And by building Voyage Mapping and showing people behind the curtain of why these slow marketing strategies work, not just giving them the content, we're going to see like a massive change in how people show up on LinkedIn and email and Pinterest. And there are still spaces open if people want to be interested in that. But that's when the light bulb went off for me and I was like, yeah, this is why I'm creating the Writers' Harbour. This is what I'm doing. And if you haven't had that light bulb, do sit with it for a little bit and think, is there something missing? Is there something I want to change? And it might not come to you straight away, and that's okay.
I will add all your links into the show notes of this episode so if people want to go and find you and catch up with your weekly Week in the Life, or also to hear more about Voyage Mapping, which is very, very exciting. Do you have I really thought you were going to quote young Donna from Mamma Mia 2 earlier, but do you have a quote to end the episode on, whether it's like a life mantra that you live by or just a little cheesy quote that's getting you through right now? Do you have one that you can share with the listeners?
Yes, and it's just come to me. I went to an awards evening for a client back in November, and this guy stood up. He was the chairman of, I think, the awards or something, and he had said that throughout his life he hadn't had a very linear start in life or linear kind of way that his business went or where he got to. And I was sitting there kind of like, we were on a table with another two and we were kind of chatting, and he was doing his speech, and then I just hear him go, because life isn't written in pen. I'm like, I'm listening to it because I'm very visual, and it's so true. Like, your life is written in pencil. It's not written in pen or permanent marker. Like, you can kind of rub out a little bit and go off in another direction, or you can, like, I don't know, just...
You can change your mind.
You can change your mind now, exactly. And I just thought, some people might see it as like a squiggle and then going off in another direction, but I just think the idea of it being like, life isn't written in pen, and you could actually just write it in pencil and be able to rub out certain parts and go in a different direction or loop back around. And I think when I moved into this house, it was 3 years to the date from when I started on cruise ships, and if that isn't like some kind of full circle fate moment, I don't know what is. But the fact it was 3 years to the date is just one of those things where maybe I didn't get my first kind of own place the first time round, but then went on cruise ships, saw the world, met amazing people, and now I still got kind of back to that point. And it didn't have to be written in pen. You could have taken another route.
Stunning. I love that your quote as a writer is about pen. That is perfect. Thank you so much for everything that you shared, Laura. And I'll add all your links into the show notes. So make sure you're going and give Laura some love. Let us know what your takeaways were from this episode and have a gorgeous rest of your week. I'll be back in your ears next Wednesday. Bye.